system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps. If exposed, remove probe. Emergency broadcast system.
Podcast for the curious mind. I don't know what that means.
Broadcasting live from a German-made microphone deep within the multifamily bunker. I am Jamal here with Devin and May and special guest Richard Gage. Richard, we're so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here for us, guys. This is awesome to get this message out.
Oh, well, now you've been a architect for the San Francisco Bay Area. You're an AIA member of the American Institute of Architects and founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Richard Gage, 911.org, right? Yeah. I got all that right? Nailed it?
Well, yes, all of that's good. Although I'm not in the San Francisco Bay anymore. I'm up in northern Idaho now.
You're a lot better spot. Congratulations.
That's a good move. He probably bought a freaking giant ranch after he sold his freaking place, you know?
Oh my God. No, we don't have it paid for. That's for sure.
Well, we appreciate you joining the show. And I guess because we've done a 9/11 story before, and, you can be an endless amount of different theories on what's happened. And what's so nice about you coming on the show is you're an actual architect. You know what you're looking at when you're looking at high-rise buildings. And when did your profession turn over into this study of what happened on 9/11?
It was 2006. I heard on the radio David Ray Griffin, who's written now 14 books on this subject.
Oh, wow.
He was being interviewed by Bonnie Faulkner. Her program is Guns and Butter in KPFA in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was just shocked for the first time, in 5 years to hear an alternative theory as to how these towers came down. I mean, I watched the towers come down, and like most other people, I think I just swallowed the official narrative, hook, line, and sinker, which told us that the fires weakened the steel and that the upper part drove the rest of the part down to the ground. And we've never seen a controlled demolition like that before, not with the Twin Towers. And I didn't even know a third tower came down on 9/11. So here's this elderly gentleman trying to tell me that there was a third tower that came down. This one here, in fact, Building 7. And I'm going, what are you talking about? I would have known if a third tower came down on 9/11. I'm an architect. The American Institute of Architects, of which I'm one of 90,000 members, would have told us. And they didn't. In fact, none of us received any bulletin on the third worst structural failure in modern history. So I had to find out if what he was talking about was true, because he was talking about the ends of the beams ejected. Well, these 4 and steel ton structural steel sections ejected laterally out of the towers, landing 600 feet in every direction, trailing thick white smoke clouds. I'm going, what? He's talking about 118 of the first responders talking about sounds of explosions, hearing explosions, seeing explosions. What are you talking about? I knew there were explosions when the planes hit the towers, but what is all this? Well, I did my homework, and my God, I found out that all of this and a whole lot more was true. So I've been talking about it 17 years now, and it just goes on and on and on, never stops.
What were the first two greatest collapses of a skyscraper? Was it Tower 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Oh.
Here's 1 and
so all 3 in that day were the worst structural fails of all time in the history of skyscrapers.
Yes, the third worst structural failure was the Building 7. I mean, this is a 47-story skyscraper, and most people, most architects and engineers don't even know that it fell. We go take our information to conferences all around the United States mostly, and we present at our evidence booth. We have a TV. We show them Building 7 coming down. We said, "What does that look like to you?" "Oh, that's a controlled demolition." "Oh, did you know when that happened?" "No, on September 11th, 2001. Does that date ring a bell?" And they go, "What do you mean? That's not one of the Twin Towers." And go, "No, it's not. But it happened, in fact, at 5:20 in the afternoon, after witnesses heard explosions once again that afternoon. This building drops like a rock straight down, uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint in under 7 seconds. That's as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. Now, that can't happen with 80 columns in the building, 40,000 tons of structural steel framing. Something had to happen to that. It all had to have been given way at once. In fact, that's what the University of Alaska study has recently told us in their 135-page report of their 4-year study.
Well,
So,
now,
yeah. And there were a few small scattered fires in this building, but NIST says these were engulfing the building, and the photographs betray that official narrative. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people. But they failed miserably. They tried to cover this whole thing up. And we just keep uncovering it year after year after year. I mean, in over almost 700 presentations now around the world in 24 countries and 100 American cities. It's by a show of hands, we asked people, do we need a new investigation here? Everybody who came in believing the official narrative ends up agreeing with us. Yeah, these are controlled demolitions. We got to get a real investigation.
So when you saw video of Building 7 fall, that was your initial reaction, was like when you saw that footage in 2006?
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen the old hotels in Las Vegas where they just drop, after explosions. They drop usually fairly symmetrically. It's exactly what Building 7 does. So, yeah, I knew that once I saw it, but guess what? I'd never seen it until 2006.
And we're not architects or even close to being architects. So explain it. Sorry if we make you dumb it down too much, but that's just our comprehension. But you're saying that when it collapsed, it just demolishes its own footprint. It didn't really cause any damage to anything other the buildings surrounding it, correct?
Well, there was some damage to the buildings, but most all of it falls into its own footprint. Yeah, that's
where with
true.
The NIST, the National Institute, they believe that was one column on the 8th floor that gave way, correct?
They believe that it was on the 12th floor where they said these fires were raging, but they were out over an hour and a half before the collapse of this building. But their initiation of collapse theory says that these fires were burning at the time of the collapse, and that they were causing thermal expansion of these long span 50-foot long beams, pushing this girder off of its seat on this particular column number 79 in the northeast corner. And then this girder failed, causing the floor 13 to fall on 12 and so on for 9 floors, leaving column 79 unbraced. So then it buckles, and then that causes a collapse all the way up to the east penthouse and down to the floor. And then this instability travels laterally in 6 seconds or so across the length of this building, which is the length of a football field. I mean, in order for this whole scenario to be happening, you have to have failing 400 structural steel connections every second. And this is like a fire hose on a sandcastle. You're just blowing it apart. Well, you can do that, or try to do that, in your computer model if you're NIST, again, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. and then you have a $20 million budget to spend 7 years trying to prove how this building came down, and we didn't get their report for 7 years after 9/11, when anybody who knew about it, this building's collapse, forgot about it. So they were just juggling this football that long. So yeah, it's pretty clear what's going on here, and we haven't even gotten to the forensic evidence in the pile or in the pulverized concrete powder throughout Lower Manhattan.
Well, it's just, I mean, and I hope we do get there. But it's just I'm just trying to establish their theory is that they use, I think it was like 11-inch, which that's not, I don't think that was true either. I don't know. I'm just throwing out what I read from the NIST report, and that it slipped off and all those catastrophes happened at once, which allowed the building to fall straight down on itself. And to me, it sounds like if you have one column go, it would want to twist down or, collapse onto something else, not just fall straight down.
If somebody kicks your knee out from under you, you tend to fall in the direction of your injury. That's what might have been expected if there was to be a collapse at Building 7, and particularly in the northeast corner. You would think that it would fall with increasing chaos, if you will, kind of following the laws of entropy. But no, how does it fall completely symmetrical with an injury, if you will, in the northeast corner? In fact, this is what caught the eye of Professor Leroy Hulsey, one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, a couple of years ago. He, from the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, and his team of PhD candidates spent 4 years studying this building because they had to find out, gosh, if this building failed due to a few small scattered fires, are any of our other high rises vulnerable to such a thing? We should really get to the bottom of this. So he reviewed the NIST input data and as much as he had and findings, and tried to simulate what they had done, and he got completely different results. There was no failure of column 79. There was no failure of surrounding columns. He determined that fire could not have brought this building down. The only thing that could have brought it down was the simultaneous failure of all the columns in the building. And that's intuitive, right? Well, how do you do that, though? He didn't speculate about that, but that's what we do in controlled demolition. They take out all the columns with shaped cutter charges. So if there were columns that were sabotaged, you'd be looking for evidence of that. Well, this is what FEMA did in 2002 in a metallurgical examination of the 2 pieces of steel that they had saved.
Because they cleared out all of that, really, didn't they?
Within 2 weeks of 9/11, there were 400 truckloads a day carting steel out of the World Trade Center complex, put on barges and sent to China for recycling before investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper forensic investigation. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene. But we were talking about the shaped cutter charges, that the steel they had.
Say you may.
Is that you guys or me?
It went away, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a fire alarm going off over here or what. Anyway, so FEMA had the first study. They started with volunteers. These volunteers worked themselves into the FEMA report. The FEMA report came out in 2002. It's called the Building Performance Assessment Team Report, and May of 2002. And in Appendix C, they put this metallurgical examination on the steel that they did have available. And what do they find? Hot temperature, sulfur, corrosion, attack on the steel. Well, wait a minute. Attack on the steel. liquid molten iron invading the grain boundaries of the steel. Well, how do we get that? What is liquid molten iron? That's liquid iron is molten iron. Molten iron is 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Do they try to explain where these temperatures came from? No, it's like not in the report, no speculation, but they document it very carefully. And they have a eutectic reaction attacking the steel. That's with sulfur. Sulfur is much more effective at cutting through steel. Well, where does the sulfur come from? NIST says, well, gosh, because later on they put out their frequently answered questions, and they suggest that, well, there's sulfur in gypsum board. Well, what? No, that's calcium sulfate. That doesn't attack the steel that for 100 years it's been designed to protect, right? We put gypsum board around materials like steel and wood to protect them from fire, not to attack them. So we then have the NIST not just denying altogether any evidence of these temperatures, and yet it's not just from the FEMA report. And by the way, they took over the report effort, the investigation in 2002, and they threw out this report, and their final or any of their reports don't have any reference to it whatsoever. And yet the New York Times called this the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation. Well, there's also first responders and even the World Trade Center structural engineer himself, Leslie Robertson, talking about a river of steel flowing. The first responders say molten steel flowing like lava down the channel rails. We have in our documentary 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, available at our website for free, richardgage911.org. You can see the photos of the crab claw excavators picking up this material, and it's dripping molten steel. Well, it turns out to be not so much molten steel, because tests like XEDS and others show that it's molten iron, just like FEMA showed. So this is all self-corroborating here. These dozens of witnesses of molten iron. And so where does molten iron come from? Molten iron is the byproduct of thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel, like a hot knife through butter. So we have the evidence of molten iron, which is which the only rational explanation in this context is thermite. Well, is there evidence of other ignited form of thermite? Yes, in fact, the U.S. Geological Survey finds in all of their dust samples billions and billions of these previously molten iron microspheres. They're the diameter of a human hair on average. They don't know where they came from, but they document them again very carefully. This is not only the USGS, but the RJ Lee Group, an environmental consulting firm who is well known around the world. So they try to get real clear about what these are. They're iron. Okay, there's 4 tons of it by extrapolation in all the World Trade Center dust. This is incredible. It's all the dust has it. The EPA, in fact, says it's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has these previously molten iron microspheres. It's a signature component that they identify. Well, again, molten iron comes from thermite. Now, if under explosive conditions, thermite would be producing liquid molten iron, it would disperse, aerosolize. And what happens to liquid when it's dispersed, like out of a spray bottle? It turns into spheres. So these cool and they fall. And this could be very well probably the only rational answer as to the toasting of the tops of the cars surrounding the World Trade Center and creating these extremely hot clouds that people were running from for their lives. So this is evidence of ignited thermite. So is there any evidence of unignited thermite in the World Trade Center dust? Turns out that there is. A small team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen studies these 7 independently collected samples in which they find these red-gray chips. They're obviously fluid applied. They're dual layered. They thought they were paint, but they're about a 1/16 of an inch large, and they're attracted by a magnet. So they have a high iron content. Well, they get real curious now. They zoom in 50,000 times with well, before that, they do X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy and find aluminum powder in this material and iron oxide. So wait a minute. That's the ingredients of thermite. What are the ingredients of thermite doing in the paint? Okay, so they zoom in 50,000 times and they find nano-sized particles of iron oxide, cubical rhomboidal shaped crystals, and also aluminum platelets. You know, this is like 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair, these pieces. So
in the paint?
In what they thought was paint, but now it's full of the ingredients of thermite, iron oxide, and aluminum powder. And these nanoparticles, very sophisticated stuff, is set in a bed of oxygen, silica, carbon. This is organic material which expands very rapidly. It's what they use in TNT to knock things over. So here, apparently, we have an incendiary thermite, which has been engineered to become much more explosive. So this is not made in a cave in Afghanistan. This is made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories.
Yeah, I think the nano sized materials, they started developing them in the early 90s.
Well, they take these chips and they put them in a heater, a differential scanning calorimeter. And guess what they do? They ignite at about 750 degrees Fahrenheit. What do they produce when they ignite? Molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found in all the World Trade Center dust by the USGS and RJ Lee. So you see, we know where all those 4 tons of molten iron microspheres came from. And because they found 4 tons of these red-gray chips also by extrapolation about. So this is of unignited material that partially ignited, I guess, some of them, because they find attached to some of these red-gray chips that are partially ignited molten iron microspheres. They previously molten iron, they cool. So you see, this is a self-corroborating set of repeatable experimental data that could be used to put a lot of people away for the crime of the century, mass murder and treason among them.
Did they find the same type of molten metal and the spheres and all that at 7 too?
The 7 and the Twin Towers are in close proximity. Collectively, the dust, the evidence that they each produced was dispersed across a 3 square mile area. So except for the pools of molten material, you can't tell what came from what. And there was extremely hot temperatures documented under 7 as well, hotter than any office fire can get to. How do we know that?
Because you said the office fire at max would last what, like an hour, hour and a half?
I didn't say that.
I'm sorry.
They said they lasted for 7 hours.
Yeah.
But they also acknowledge and admit that a fire moves around and burns up things. It only stays in one area for 20 or 30 minutes. it moves on looking for fresh new fuel sources. So what we have, though, is a very persistent heat. I mean, the fires themselves in both 7 and the Twin Towers surely would have been extinguished by the mechanical action of the collapsing building. But what we have hours and days and weeks and 3 months after 9/11 is the persistence of extreme temperatures rising up to 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The office fires are only 500 degrees typically Fahrenheit, maybe 1,400 degrees at the worst fires. But in Building 7, the thermal imaging from the air flights, which is very accurate, finds on the surface of the pile 1,400 degree temperatures 3 or 4 days later. Now, how do you get 1,400 degree temperatures, the temperatures associated with the hottest office fires, on the surface of a pile where there's no office fires burning? So easily they are measuring something much hotter, deeper down in the pile, that's radiating and cooling off to 1,400 degrees as it gets to the surface. And the ends of these beams that were being picked up by the iron workers, they were freaking out because they're dripping with molten iron, molten metal, molten steel is what they call it. Turns out, as we mentioned, to be molten iron. So this is, just clear evidence of the use of thermite in and of itself. These pools of molten iron that are seen and documented by so many in our documentary 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out.
Well, I mean, how does this make you feel learning all this stuff?
I was freaked out in 2006 when I heard David Ray Griffin on the radio talking about that. I said, first thought is, this can't be true. I mean, clearly he's lying. I would know if a third tower came down. And then I went the next night to the Oakland Theater, and they were packed, 600 people packed to see David Ray Griffin. I couldn't even get in. I had to go home to watch on the live stream. And as this information was coming in, I was just realizing that, oh my God, this means they lied on a huge scale about Building 7. We haven't even gotten to the evidence for the Twin Towers, really, the explosive evidence there. But as I heard all that, I'm thinking, I was a flag waving Reagan Republican. I wanted to get in those bastards who did this to us in Afghanistan and
everyone
in Iraq.
Everyone felt that way. I mean, I had a paper route when it happened, and the Des Moines Register printed out a flag on the front that you could cut out, and that was in every window of the houses I delivered to. Everyone, I think, was feeling that way. It was a crazy moment. It was a crazy moment.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I just felt my whole world turning upside down. It was extremely uncomfortable, to say the least. I was in a state of shock. I got angry then as I realized I couldn't get around the truth of what Professor Griffin and then Professor Jones, Stephen Jones, nuclear physicist formerly of Brigham Young University, has documented evidence of extreme temperatures himself in the World Trade Center dust, including evaporated lead and melted molybdenum, and that takes 4,000 degree temperatures. So we have a serious problem with the official story.
Well, let's get into the trade towers then, because the official narrative is that the two planes that flew in there, right? It weakened the exoskeleton of the trade tower. This is my YouTube research. I'm no architect, but so just bear with me. But the planes came in, took out and then scraped off the fireproofing on the steel beams, and then the jet fuel burned them, weakened them, or broke them completely, and then the top part of the trade tower falls down onto itself, right?
Well, let's take it from, it's pretty close. Yeah. So the planes broke columns. Yes. The jet fuel's burned up mostly outside the building, even according to NIST, 90% of it. The rest of it was gone in 10 minutes. So all the jet fuel did was light fires, kind of like a barbecue with lighter fluid, right? But we do have some broken columns. And then what they say is that the long span steel trusses, which were more vulnerable because they're lighter weight, open web steel joists is what they are called. They sag due to the fires, and that pulls in the perimeter columns, and that causes them to buckle. And so the upper part above the point of jet plane impacts drives the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroys itself. Now, none of that, with the exception of the broken columns and the jet fuel, can be true. Because even FEMA documents and demonstrates that the antenna falls first in the case of the North Tower. Well, what they're saying is the antenna sits on the hat truss, which sits on the core columns, which therefore must have fallen first, and they're correct. But NIST came in and threw that out. They say, oh no, the floor trusses sagged and pulled in the perimeter columns, and so they failed first, the perimeter columns. Now, that's a cover-up, because they can't explain how the core columns all failed at once, even with some of them being broken by the planes. And because the South Tower, none of them, maybe a couple of them in a corner, were broken, but it doesn't explain how the buildings could have fallen fairly symmetrically. So,
well, and it was designed for a plane to hit it, correct?
John Skilling, the mentor and boss of Leslie Robertson, says that it was designed to resist two Boeing 707s, the largest plane of their time. But he says the problem would be that the fuel would dump into the building, but the building would still be there. So that's a quote. But what we see, the upper section doesn't drive the rest of the section down to the ground. This is where the rubber meets the road. That's a pure lie. What we see is the upper section destroying itself in just 4 seconds. It's like gone in 4 seconds. It's not destroying anything below it. And we show that very carefully in 9/11 explosive evidence. Experts speak out. After that, and by the way, all of that occurs after the first responders hear explosions. They're on record, 156 of them now, by the efforts of Professor Graham McQueen, who documents very carefully that these explosions are occurring in many cases before the towers even come down. That's a specific order of events that you can follow again and again with respect to these first responders. They're saying, like a train running under my feet, and then the tower comes down again and again. And we've got dozens of them on the documentary. So this upper section, we're told, drove the rest of the building down to the ground, but we talked about it being gone. Then we have laterally ejected, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons ejected laterally at 80 miles an hour out of the sides, all sides of these towers, both towers, landing 600 feet in every direction. The gravity works down, a collapse works down. So we don't have the steel is, well outside the footprint of each of these buildings. So you have to ask yourself, how could it be available to crush the building anyway? It's not. That's almost half the weight of the building right there.
Is the argument
the
like,
third of the weight of the building is the concrete. So we're looking for a stack of pancakes at the bottom of a gravitational collapse, but we don't see 100 floors. There's 110 floors in each tower. Each of them are an acre in size, massive buildings. We don't see 50 stacked up pancakes. We don't see 10. We don't see 1 acre size floor even broken up down in the pile. What happened to all the concrete? It's pulverized in midair to 100 micron particles and distributed across lower Manhattan, again in a 3 square mile area. So 30% of the composition of this dust, according to the US Geological Survey, is concrete. It's all been pulverized, laid like a blanket 3 inches thick across lower Manhattan from river to river. So if the concrete is distributed from river to river, is it available to crush the building? No. You can see during the destruction of these buildings, you see huge quantities of pulverized concrete in midair. So it's not available to crush the building. So the question is, what crushed the building? Nothing crushed the building. The building was destroyed by these explosions and these incendiaries, which we talked already about the evidence of, which are so hot in 4,000 degree temperatures up there, incinerating everybody and causing these beams and columns to form into like noodles. It takes thousands of degrees to do that to steel without cracking it. So that's all documented quite well in the documentary as well. So you have also these explosive ejections occurring out of the sides of the towers, 20, 40, even 60 stories down below this zone of destruction. These are called squibs in the controlled demolition industry. They're obviously explosions. They eject material building components out with them. Maybe they're mistimed. We don't know that. They're just obviously explosions. They're 150 to 200 feet per second, these ejections out of the sides of the towers. So interestingly, this whole theory of the upper section driving the rest of the building down to the ground is immediately disproven by a clear look at the evidence, the video evidence, but also it's proof by this mathematical genius from Northwestern University, Chicago Northwestern University, Zdenek Bazant, just 2 days after 9/11 submits for peer review this paper documenting what he believes happened at the towers. And so everybody else is freaking out, right? When's the next plane coming to attack us? What's happening to our country? This guy's in his den cranking out this extremely complex paper and talking about the weight of the upper part. Well, it took 10 years for engineers to decode this paper. He's like, the top mathematical and structural engineering wizard in the country that they apparently paid to produce this monstrosity. Well, by the time it was decoded, they learned that the formulas are correct, but the upper section was exaggerated twice the mass that it would have had, including concrete and steel, and that the structure below was decreased by a factor of 3. So this was rigged in favor of a collapse, this whole calculation, and it remains the key theoretical basis for NIST's failure theory in the Twin Towers.
So they believe the floors being driven down by the top section that was damaged, just pancake those floors all the way down. That's the belief, right? By
NIST. The columns, yeah, it's a belief that's backed up by fraud.
Yeah, and then they got this mathematician to support it. So that's how I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah,
and they just
but he fudged the numbers. You know,
yeah,
it's like the accountants at Enron.
And that peer-reviewed paper has been challenged. You know, what you do in science is challenge others' peer-reviewed work with your own. And Tony Zambodi, Richard Johns, Gregory Zudolinski submitted their own paper twice in different forms, but they weren't accepted. What was the reason? That they were out of scope. Well, how is it out of scope to show a previously produced paper in the same journal as inaccurate? No, this remains a ethics violation that is going to court.
Wow.
Wow. I owe May an apology.
Yeah. Thank you.
He's convinced me. I believe
Thank
him.
you.
Yeah, bro.
He's our show skeptic, you know, which we love to have because we need those in our lives too.
Yeah.
But I told him, I said, we're having this guy on, and I don't even know what to say half the time. It's, you know, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to think.
Fascinating. It's freaking appalling.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. It's just a huge bamboozle. I mean, just all this time, you know, and with all the work, you know, you were saying you were doing, Richard, it's there. Now, who fights for the people so we can uncover or just lift the rug up? I mean, what's the next step there? You know what I mean? Like, because I know Trump came out when he was, you know, running for president. He was running for office. He wanted, you know, hey, I want to uncover what happened to 7 and what happened to the World Trade Centers. And then, you know, a couple of weeks ago on his golf course, you know, a reporter brought it up and he was like, yeah, it's still kind of a shame. Well, you know, we haven't found out, you know, and that's my thing is I just would like to know, you know, with all this evidence and all this, you know, concrete, you know, just with what you've built with all the other architect or with everybody else, like who takes this fight next? You know what I mean? Where do we go from here? I guess because I mean, it's, you look at this and you look at everything you've put together. It seems like a no-brainer. It seems like, you know, but
it is a no-brainer. If people listen to the evidence and watch it, I mean, you got to see all this stuff that I'm talking about. You don't just want to listen to me. You gotta look at it, and you can do it in an hour on the website, richardgage911.org. There's several documentaries and presentations that I make on these subjects, all of which show the graphic evidence, the videos and the photos, which is it is easy to get. I mean, a 7th grader can understand that all 3 of these buildings were brought down by explosive demolition. So what the next step? I've been taking the next step for 17 and a half years. I keep presenting this information. We've given it to all 535 members of Congress on at least 7 occasions in different forms, with the 3,500 architects and engineers signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation. Yeah, that's 30,000 years of technical credibility there. It's got to account for something. We've given to them our documentaries as we produce them. Same with the media representatives, again and again. Nothing happens in either case typically. A few little things happen. We've got Jim Himes of Connecticut writing NIST a letter saying, hey, there's evidence of thermite here. What do you say about this? And they just write him back a letter. Oh yeah, there it looks like that, but these are just aluminum from the cladding and rust from the steel beams mixing and confusing people. They just wave off the evidence. This is what most people do, who either have an agenda to hide it, or have the inability to face their own psychology, which is difficult, as we talked about earlier. This evidence forces us to come face to face with a vast conspiracy that is far more serious than many of the typical conspiracy theories that we can more easily pass off. We have, this is on the order of the assassination of JFK. 90% of Americans now understand that this was an inside operation. Well, now maybe 20% at the most understand 9/11 was an inside operation. 30 to 40% have very serious questions and believe the government may have been involved, but they don't have the evidence because, I'm probably the main spokesperson for this evidence in the world today. And I can assure you that we don't have enough viewership, support levels to magnify the distribution of this evidence to get it out to the American public. That is the next step. We're working on a film. It's called 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, where we're presenting this whole body of evidence in the most comprehensive assembly of it ever. And in the context of a grand jury investigation, we'll be presenting it, looking into the camera for the grand jury, to whom we have, or for whom we have submitted 60 exhibits in a grand jury petition given to the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan to impanel a special grand jury. So this is by the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, which I will be partnering with the litigation director of, Mick Harrison, who will be presenting himself along and after each section of evidence, what this evidence is, what it means, what can the jurors do with it, what opportunities do they have to subpoena persons of material interest, who might they indict, questions like that. So that's a very special opportunity. We're filming next month, a month from today, and we're very excited about getting this out in a series and putting it free on YouTube so everybody can share it with everybody else.
This NIST just seems to be a problem too. Like every reference is back. Well, NIST said this, NIST said that. Who is the National Institution?
Who is NIST?
Yeah,
NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people. And all three of them. And they did a miserable job, as you can begin to see. In fact, they're under the Commerce Department. Their leadership was changed out along with the leadership of the Commerce Department when the Bush administration came into power. So they were set up to handle this from the beginning, and handle with a capital H, right?
So Bush put them in charge. Bush put
the Bush administration replaced the Department of Commerce, and NIST leadership was replaced as well.
And that was in 2000 when he came into office, right?
Yeah,
2000 or 2000, January 20th, 2001.
You drawing a line, May, on your board over there?
Devin, why?
drawing a line
Why
on
is
your
your
board over there,
favorite
bro?
president?
Huh?
Why is your favorite president
I
just
didn't say he's my president.
putting favorite
Bet.
things together so he can just help bamboozle everybody else?
Well,
I mean,
let's.
that makes
That's
sense.
the least of your favorite president's sins.
Yeah.
Let's
Devin's
look
a huge Bush lover.
Don't listen to
Bush
this.
lover.
No.
Who did he bring into power? The Project for a New American Century was a neocon think tank. They had a website. On the website, they declared their goals: a regional hegemony in the Middle East, a vast increase in the Pentagon budget. And so they said, though, on that website, absent a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor, these goals will likely take a long time. So Bush writes in his diary the next day, today we had our new Pearl Harbor. Now, he brought into power with him those key individuals from that think tank, Paul Wolfowitz and others.
Wolfowitz was in that think tank?
Yeah.
Is it still going on, that think tank, or?
Well, the website is still up.
Still up.
I'm aware of that. Project for a New American Century. And Cheney, the worst of that neocon bunch, of course, running the whole operation, inevitably. That's just my personal opinion based on other people's research and what he said and how he lied to the 9/11 Commission. They kept saying, we kept getting all these lies from the White House, from NORAD, from the Air Force, from the CIA, from the FBI. The 9/11 Commission leaders said that they were set up to fail. One of the 9/11 commissioners, Max Cleland, resigned, citing this is a national scandal.
Really?
And the attorney for the 9/11 Commission, John Farmer, says there was a decision not to tell the people the truth about 9/11.
I mean, it's wild. Like I know you've discussed it before, but like with the insurance and the terrorist, protections for the buildings and stuff like that. That's where my mind kind of wandered way back before, it was like, oh man, this is just a huge another cash grab in a sense. But I like it. If I don't know if you've been asked, I'm sure you have, but like, what's your, do you have a take on why these, why, 7 came down in the tower? Like, do you what's your thought on that? Or, do you like, I don't want to, I don't want you to, but I was curious. I was just like, cause everyone has their like, oh, inside job, or they believe that, other things, but like, I want to know, like, what is your thought on why this, why 7 came down, why the towers came down?
Well, in a crime, you're looking for means, motive, and opportunity. And we have all of those extant at the crime of the century, 9/11. In fact, James Corbett created a film, 9/11 Trillions, Follow the Money, where he documents the incredible flow of money, and not the least of which, of course, was to Halliburton, owned by Cheney, in Iraq and Afghanistan, supporting the war effort there. The arms industry raking in billions, a $48 billion increase in the Pentagon budget as a result of 9/11, part of a $6.5 trillion global war of terror on the world, and achieving the goals of the Project for a New American Century with regional hegemony in the Middle East, with the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, and almost Syria, and almost Iran,
Well, and when you talk about
Libya,
our Pearl Harbor, it being our Pearl Harbor, the purpose of Pearl Harbor was to get us to go to war. Right? I mean, like Pearl Harbor happens, and now every American is on the same board. We were getting on because we didn't want to get involved in what Europe was doing over there for a long time. And Pearl Harbor happens. Now it's us. Now they've invoked us, and all of the power goes to the federal government at that moment to mobilize the nation in the direction it wants to mobilize. And so this had to have been their view, right? Like if we can create a modern day Pearl Harbor, we can do whatever we want, and the American people will let us do it.
And they did. Ed Snowden taught us something, and that was that our own intelligence agencies were systematically scooping up every one of our emails, texts, and phone calls recorded to be produced later. This is completely unconstitutional, but as part of the surveillance state that we've entered as a result of 9/11, probably one of the other key motives for the planning and execution of this event as well, because now, those terrorists are not just out there in the world, they're here in the United States. In fact, they could be in your neighborhood, and you better get duct tape and plastic to put over your windows, because there could be a biochemical attack from a secret terrorist cell getting messages from overseas in a cave from Osama bin Laden. So and you have these FBI infiltrated organizations that they actually create Muslim terrorists and now domestic terrorists to try to increase their own power and prestige and budget and control over the American people with unconstitutional surveillance. We have a very tight grid of spying on us, and the U.S. Constitution was intended to protect us from government abuses like this. So now with these catastrophic events like a new Pearl Harbor, and now we have another one called COVID, and with a far worse solution to that problem that's been prepared for us in advance also, which billions have been made on by those who are in charge of the policy regarding that final solution. We have a real serious problem. The American people, I think, are starting to wake up to it. I think, unfortunately, half of them got the jab, and the other half remain rightly skeptical, given the unsafe and ineffective solution there.
Well, if the government is willing to blow up its own towers to make a point, it has no problem viewing you as, not valuable to their system.
Yeah. What I like about what your information you're presenting is it is all evidence based. And then after that, a lot of conspiracy theories are just theory. But this one, it starts off with hard evidence, like thermite explosions, stuff like that. I don't know what I believe, like how it all went. Maybe maybe the terrorists were real, but they just don't let a bad, what do you call that, Corey? Don't let a bad chaos go to waste or some shit like that.
Yeah. Don't let I forget this.
They piggybacked on it, we'll let this happen.
Calamity go to waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
or the fact that there's all that gold that was under 7 and they had to,
not under 7, under 6.
Under 6.
The Treasury Department did have a gold heist going on, but I can't get a lot of detail on that. But that was just the beginning of the heist. The bond heist is the big one bonds that came due on September 12th, the next day, which was debt that was used by the globalists to bring down the Soviet Union, and that succeeded. But that was a debt that apparently didn't have to be paid. So James Corbett talks about that as well.
Listen, if this was the CIA, that's the most CIA thing to do, is not only accomplish this, but then get out of some debt in the process.
Yeah.
Side note.
Yeah, these are very complex operations, to be sure. I mean, we have the creation of a surveillance state, the invasion of other countries, the loss of our civil liberties through the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. Any of us can be arrested without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury. We can be tortured and even assassinated. This has happened. American citizens without any due process.
Well, wasn't it the creation of the FISA court off of the Patriot Act, where it was, nameless judges and not privy to the public, the secret court? I think that's FISA court, right?
Well, I think that had been going on before. What we have is the abuse of this FISA system since 9/11.
Yeah, and then, I remember very clearly them saying they're only going to listen to you if you're making international calls. And that's what people don't remember about Snowden. What made it so huge was that we were told under this premise, well, if you're making international calls to the middle of Pakistan every other night, we're going to start surveilling you. And that was the premise of the passing of the Patriot Act. And amongst other things, like the airport security and all that stuff. And everyone was like, you know what, that makes sense. That makes sense. If someone's calling over to these areas and, yeah, they should listen to them. But then Edward Snowden comes out 10 years, 13 years later and says, no, they're keeping everything and putting it in an archive. And then when they want to pull it up, they can just pull it up whenever. And that guy is still not allowed to come back to the United States for divulging just that information.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
No pardon or anything like that. Sorry, not to bring it down.
And I'm increasingly concerned because 9/11 was 21 years ago now, but what's happening is that people are waking up to the abuses of science in the last 2 years, and if we can tie these two major false flag events together, people can begin to see a set of patterns, which will help people in the 9/11 truth movement wake up to the crimes of COVID, and vice versa. The people who are waking up en masse to the crimes of for instance, 31,000 people died as a result of the vaccine. And that is in America only. And that is on the VAERS website. That is public information. That is not published by the mainstream media. If you knew that 31,000 people have already died as a result of the vaccine, would you take it? The answer would be likely no. And guess what? That's only 1% of the people that have probably died. How do we know that? Dr. Lazarus was funded by the CDC to find out how many adverse deaths and injuries are actually being reported. And he determined that it's likely only 1% of them are reported.
There's plenty of evidence where these kids are suffering myocarditis and nurses are getting fired for trying to find someone to report it to. And it just reminds me of what NIST was doing. You have your one bureaucratic investigative organization and they just filter out anything that's inconvenient,
Yeah, it
inconvenient.
doesn't fit their agenda or fit their story. Yeah. Oh,
I mean, that's what happened with NIST, right? Am I wrong in understanding that? I mean, whoever was put in charge, I mean, sure, it's the name of a board, but there's individuals in charge of it that sound to me just like yes men,
Oh yeah, people are put in positions of leadership who are responsible to those who put them there. Uh, in this case, uh, you've got a line of corrupt administrations going back to Lyndon Johnson. And so what we get is what we deserve because we don't do our homework before we vote. And when we vote, it tends to not, the voting system is hijackable. That's been proven again and again. So we have a huge problem. And I think the way to wake people up is to share with them the parallels between 9/11 and COVID and where they can really get it. For instance, creating a climate of fear. We have that with 9/11 where, the fear meter is up to orange
yes.
or red.
There's still people walking around where I live with freaking masks on.
Well, that's the other part of it.
By
An
themselves.
ATM machine could have that virus that could kill your grandma. So how you can't deal with that psychologically. So you just do what they tell you to do. You stay at home, you wear a mask, etc. But this climate of fear creates that. And so how do you do that? You have an elusive, powerful enemy. In the case of 9/11, it's terrorism, and they don't just wear helmets of a certain color. They're
everywhere.
They're in every major metropolitan area, and now they're domestic, so they can be and probably are white and male, and so there's a new enemy, and so then you have on the COVID side, of course, the virus, which it can kill you, but you can't see it. And then you have the abuse of science and the censorship of any information, labeling those who question the authority or their data as conspiracy theorists. So it shuts down the discussion right away. Although all the conspiracy theories seem to be coming true now, so they're running out of them. They're all coming true.
It's wild how they're just on a checklist and they're just, oh shoot, we gotta come up with something. We're running short.
There's also these drills that happen because if these events are planned, people would know about them in advance because they're planning them. Well, not only do they plan them, they tell you about them. In the case of 9/11, we have a big drill on the day before 9/11. FEMA and local and national law enforcement 1,000 of them are filling Pier 92 with a biochemical attack drill, and they're ready to go. And so as soon as Building 7 goes down, the whole emergency operations center moves from Building 7 over to Pier 92. It was ready to go. No problem whatsoever. We'd just pick up right where we left off there. In the case of we have by the way, drills, we have like 40 different drills going on the month before 9/11, the weeks before 9/11, and half of them on the day of 9/11, with hijacking drills, false targets on the radar screens of the NORAD techs. And they don't know whether it's real world or not. They're kind of freaked out, and they can't get the drills to stop until after the Pentagon is hit. And that plane that was heading to the Pentagon was flying around for an hour after both towers were hit. So it should never have made it to the Pentagon, right?
No.
They can take down a flight, especially after they know the country's under attack.
Yeah.
In minutes, they can do that. But no, that plane had to be allowed to hit its target or whatever hit the target over there. That's a subject of of discussion. But it wasn't Hani Hanger who failed Cessna flying school. So the story doesn't add up. It does. There's all of these holes in the story. There's another parallel between 9/11 and COVID. In the case of drills on the COVID side, we have Event 201, which was planning for a pandemic 3 months prior to the pandemic outbreak.
Yeah.
A SARS-CoV-2 virus outbreak that they had this tabletop exercise with experts from around the world working on. And all of a sudden, and they even, by the way, they even have a plan in that exercise to deal with the vaccine hesitancy that inevitably erupted in response to these vaccines, which were only tested on 6 mice.
Well, and I mean, I feel like they've been planning this whole vaccine thing for quite some time, because the amount of, I just remember on YouTube starting around 2013 seeing a lot of criticism to people who were anti-vaxxers or, you know, things like that. But they started off with, you know, your regular vaccinations you got when you were a child, and sort of perfected it. And now that we're in full force, they have a perfect message for people who don't want to get vaccinated, as far as calling them out, you know, as far as calling them out in propaganda tones. And they were doing the same thing 9/11. It was un-American to think anything other than the towers got hit by planes and it collapsed. You know, it was not supporting our troops talking about that. The first time it was brought to me, I'd go to this restaurant almost every week, and the cook snuck me a CD or a DVD, you know, that he had burned, and I think it was Loose Change. I can't remember. It was 2008. He gave it. He goes, "You got to watch this." And I sat there and watched it. I'm like, well, it does, you know, now that you mention it, it does look like a controlled demolition, you know, and they had the side by side of the buildings falling, but it had never processed in my mind before that when I watched those towers fall. And now all I can see is controlled demolition.
Well, because if you think about it, because I was thinking about this, was when we were in school when this happened, like everything stopped at school. We were all brought to the library or to the gym, and it was on multiple TVs. And for the next couple weeks, that's all we did in school was, hey, let's check in on this. Let's watch, you know, what's going on, you know, with all this. And it was just, you know, I don't know if there's any connect to that, but it was like they were just jamming it down your, you know, just, hey, take this home and talk to about your parents, you know, take this and talk to with your neighbors, you know, like, you know, hey, we were attacked, you know, but now when, like what Corey said, when we get older and you take a step back and you look at it, you're like, hey, wait, look at that. That's, you know, that doesn't add up. That doesn't add up at all. And that's mind blowing. I mean, what you said earlier with how they were cleaning all that up and then just shipping it to China, just like, you know, before anybody real could get their hands on it. I mean, that blows my mind, because, you know, what was, you know, that stuff that was shipped over to China before anybody of truth could get their hands on it to really dive into it. And they're like, nope, that doesn't fit what we're doing here. We'll give you 2 pieces that are probably in our favor, and you go and play with those.
And even those found incredible evidence of what could only be thermite.
Yeah.
Well, they look like Swiss cheese, right? Was those?
Yeah, one of them from Building 7 had Swiss cheese dollar-size holes, silver dollar-size holes in it. I mean, this doesn't happen by office fires, and this is from Building 7, this particular piece, which was not hit by a plane, right? But even plane fuel, jet fuel, is just kerosene essentially. According to its own manufacturer, it burns only 600 degrees Fahrenheit in open air. So it's just not, it doesn't burn any hotter than desks or chairs.
Right. I was going to say, for people who don't know what nanothermite is, it's like an oxidizer, right? It's just a natural reaction. Like once it gets burning, it's really hard to extinguish, and it gets crazy hot. Like when I was in the Marines, right? I was demolition stuff like that, but you had incendiary grenades, and a lot of these gamers out here, you got your incendiary, you chuck and like kill people and shit, right? But they actually did a demonstration, and we put a thermite grenade on like an engine block, and it fucking burned right through that bitch, quick. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, and just piles of metal, like liquid metal, just, and then it just burns right through it.
Yeah.
It's impressive stuff. I mean, it's nasty.
It really is. And so in terms of what to do, I encourage everybody who's watching to inform yourself on the website, richardgage911.org. And I also ask you to get this information, just send the link to every architect and engineer that you can find, everybody that you know, because it's going to take the public to turn this around. It's obviously not happening in the mainstream media. It's not happening by our government. It's us. So this is part of one of many conspiracies, if you will, that you guys have been talking about, and we've got to just keep waking up people, encourage them to get their own podcast together and reach every level of society that we can. That's why I've been at it, nonstop for 17 and a half years now, and I will never stop. So I'm going to keep going. And I wanted to thank you guys for having me on. I just hope everybody does something with this material.
Well, we're honored to have you on our show. We're not a huge show, but we're nicer than the PBD podcast. I tell you that.
Yeah, you saw that.
I saw that, and that was, I wanted to real quick, the elevator conversation and whatnot you had with those guys, where they, like they couldn't fathom, that
Who
conversation.
would do it?
Yeah,
who would do it?
But to me, that makes, like, with the switch of the organizations with the elevator company and whatnot that you talked about, and then you could easily bring certain people into that and make something and set up those buildings to make them, like I was like, how can they not understand that? For me, I would think little, MK Ultra or something, little mind. Hey, this is what you are assigned to do. We're going to take this building down, and you're going to be mum about it. I mean, I don't.
And no one has a problem with believing that ideology could cause grown men to fly a plane into a building. No one has a problem understanding that ideology, but that's true with anyone that believes in something to that degree. You can convince them whatever they're doing is for the greater good, and they'll be mum about it for the rest of their lives because they've accomplished something good.
Mom's talking guys into strapping bombs across their chest and going in.
Yeah, you can believe that.
It's same thing.
Yeah, that someone was willing to do this, or the work behind getting them to explode, and who knows how much time they had to plan it out. But the evidence from an architect proves that it's just impossible for this national narrative
without some help. Yeah
Exactly. It's
for sure.
Well, thanks so much, Richard. We really appreciate you.
It's been real informative.
Yeah,
thank you guys. I appreciate it so much.
Be sure to follow Richard Gage and 911.org. Check out his movies and the great website page. Thanks again.
Keep checking in, because I want to see the documentary you're coming out, or
the film,
the short series or the series. Yeah, that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, we'll get it to you. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. How you doing over there, Devin? I told you.
It's wild. It's wild, isn't it?
Like, no, for me, it's how I am, guys.
I know, and I love it. That's why you're on the show.
I need legit evidence. Theories. Yeah, sure. Like when I come across theories, I think logically. Like, what's the reason? And even now, like all that evidence suggests foul play.
I wish I would have went in
especially with thermite. Like I didn't realize it had all the evidence of the burning metal, of molten metal like that. I never heard that before.
4 tons.
Yeah.
It's still freaking melting as they're picking it up out of the pile. That means the thermite was still burning.
Well,
Yeah.
and when they did when he said they went over with the plane to look, I mean, that to me is just like a volcano, right? Because you can pick up those heat sensors from that volcanic,
Yeah.
the lava. So that's, with that plane going over there and then picking up the temperatures from the ground, that right there tells you that's no fucking office fire because someone burned their ramen noodles and threw it in the trash. That is
Yeah.
that is some shit. But I wish I would have went with because his elevator conversation they had with the companies and stuff, how they swap companies. That was my favorite part of his PBT or whatever that podcast. Yeah.
PBS podcast.
That was I love that. That was great.
Did you hear what it was, Kevin?
Oh, I missed that
So
one.
the manufacturer that installed the elevators and did the upkeep on them was fired 3 months before 9/11, and they brought in an elevator company called Ace Engineers or something like Ace Elevators. Yeah. Which to me, Ace Elevators, that's no more CIA than anything else, Anyway, but Ace Elevators did maintenance in their elevator system. I don't know if you guys know how it works, but there's expressways that would take you from top to bottom. Yeah. And then in between the expressways, there's several smaller, not as fast elevators that take you in between sections of floors. And that's how they were able to disperse people evenly without there being a big buildup at, a central elevator. So the elevator shafts are all throughout that building, all around the interior core, right? So you have your interior core and then your outer core. So if they had access to the interior core,
that's it.
That makes sense. Why I didn't even know about the tower, but the tower does immediately the antenna.
Yeah, you could see. I remember watching it live.
Clearly drops inside.
Yeah,
because remember they said that was going to be
it falls from the place. Yeah, it falls from the top in, not the other way around. Yeah, and the whole pancaking and the concrete's just gone. Like what? You think it would be stacked up
because he dove into that other They went a little bit more, I guess, technical or describing the powder and everything else that covered the streets, covered the blocks and of whatnot. But
I mean, building that big is going to spread some shit when it comes.
Yeah. But it's just fair. I wanted to ask him on a lighter note what his favorite building was, but I didn't get that in.
Oh, you mean like in the world
as an architect?
As an architect, they all have favorite buildings.
Yeah.
But he got out of there before I could see.
He's like, I got out of these guys.
Yeah. I thought it was great. I definitely if he sends that to you, send that to us because I wrote some of it down so I can try to remember.
Evan's been. I'm sort of surprised, Evan. I thought you were going to fight it, but it's such good evidence. It's good. Yeah. It's real good evidence.
Well, it's all science-based evidence. It's legit. Third-party people have confirmed.
You got a phone call?
It's not me. Phone call. Let's from the Curious Mind line here. Show. Thanks for calling the Curious Mind line.
Sunshine.
Oh, Sunshine.
To accept, press 1.
Can we accept it?
Press 2.
We'll press 1. We'll see what happens here. Sunshine, you're on live with Phantom Facts. Sunshine.
Does she butt dial you? That'd be hilarious.
Going once.
Is a butt dial?
Is a butt dial?
I think it's a butt dial.
Is your phone service that bad as your internet?
No. I had the thing in because someone called in, but they didn't leave a voicemail. I thought maybe they would. I didn't want to interrupt the middle of the. No texts or calls. I mean, we got a crap ton of views on the TikTok advertising this show.
Really?
But it's hard to because you can fight conspiracy theories all day long.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to fight architectural.
We could have went probably 2 more hours with him, and seriously. You know what I mean?
What do you think, Devin? Now that you realize,
I still think I don't know. What did they use to, created their own cell and talked those guys into attacking? Like those guys had help, and they were just preparing and waiting for this attack to happen so they could do what they wanted to do.
For
me, it's like even the plane attack is fucking terrible. Even if the buildings don't come down, You know,
Yes. Yeah. Why bring? Well, the building's coming down, dude. That was the cherry on the top because you knew there was people in there. You knew there was people in there, and they could have saved most of them. And this way, you get rid of you get rid of a crap ton of people and all that loss of life. I mean, how many people did we lose in Pearl Harbor?
I don't know the numbers.
I think it was
I'd
like
be
around
lying if I said.
I think it was around 2,500.
Okay.
You know, how many people did we lose at the trade towers? Just at the trade towers was 2,000, or it was 1,900 something. But with all of it combined, it was over 2,000.
Right.
You know, it is the same. It had this
For that cockbag to write it in his diary. Hey, this is our modern day Pearl Harbor. And we're going to war.
I still believe Junior didn't know they were going to do it. That face. Remember we talked about his face in the school
when he was given the info.
Yeah. That face is a face of God damn it, they actually did it.
He's such a gullible idiot. Like he's just. But I mean, he was the perfect one to put in the office to let that shit to let it go. That was
so.
wild.
You think the U.S. government did it now, Devin? So what do you think?
Well, yeah. Like somebody did it.
There's a lot of profits too off of it. With Devin's thing
it wrapped up everything in nice tidy bows. The CIA has got their building destroyed, and all those paper records are gone now. So
that's true. Is that
all
in 7?
All the people that died or that didn't show up.
A few of those floors, yeah, not all of it, but
yeah.
What'd you say, May?
Well, like the conspiracy of like the certain individuals that didn't show up to the towers or to 7 that were everyday clock in, clock out people, you know, like they happen to call in sick or whatever, you know, and they didn't show up. I know, but like, and then how they in the Pentagon, how they supposedly reshuffled the offices and put that like.
Oh yeah, it was the one wing that was newly constructed,
and they put those the following the money or whatever, like whatever that department was, they relocated them to the exact part of where the missile or plane hit. Are you fucking kidding me? Those motherfuckers were in the back of the Pentagon, and then they had to get the offices had to get remodeled.
Well, I think now I don't think there's that.
I know it's a stretch, but
I think like you had masterminds, which was probably the people he mentioned, Cheney for sure, not Rumsfeld, because Rumsfeld had just announced the day before. Remember what he had announced? That the Pentagon was missing like $2.3 trillion, just gone.
Yeah, that department.
That was September 10th. That was September 10th. He came out with that. September 11th. Yeah. September 11th, it all goes to hell. I don't know. The CIA, man, I the more we talk about the CIA, the more I feel like, and maybe it's just sort of like a boogeyman thing, like CIA.
But it's crazy where you said, where you guys
got the budget for it.
Yeah, you clear the debts, right? You clear like or whatever. Yeah. So I found a fantastic TikTok. I think I sent it to you. Where like World War III. Depending, how we wanted, how that would play out, we could clear our debts with China, and all that. And I was like, ooh, that could be something to look into.
Well, and especially what was the news you just sent about China doing a huge U.S. dump or a dump of U.S. dollars, which would just inflate our market.
That's currency wars. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
when you look at how much
China has a crap ton of American dollars.
It's like $1 trillion or something. That's it, of the freaking $50 trillion debt. You know what I'm saying? It's not much compared to the actual debt.
2%.
Yeah, let's Google it. So we're not calling ourselves liars.
Well, we're America, so everyone has to have the rest.
No, the U.S. Federal fucking Reserve, bro.
Yeah,
they buy. That's how the government gets their money. They create a bond. Yeah. Remember quantitative easing? That's what all that is. They create a bond. The Federal Reserve creates money out of nothing, buys the bond, and then we pay them back with interest on money they created from nothing.
Exactly.
It's stupid.
Did you guys talk Toppies already? I missed that.
No, we didn't do
I was
Toppies at all.
saving for tomorrow.
We'll save them for tomorrow.
Yeah, see, China owns $981 billion in U.S. debt, nearly $1 trillion. But like the U.S. national debt is way higher than that. You know what I'm saying?
But if China is going to go off on a gold standard for the yuan? They can't.
Oh, I think that's the only way that. Yes, U.S. debt.
Is it Russia
trillion,
and China?
Right?
They're backing it by gold and silver. Isn't it their currency that they're coming up with?
The whole thing. I mean, we're going to talk about that. I mean, there's lots to learn, but the U.S. is the reserve world currency, right? And like I was saying before, countries have to get dollars to trade with other countries to buy their goods, vice versa. China and Russia and a lot of these other countries, because we're bullying people with our dollar status, like we did it to Iran, right? So Iran wasn't playing ball. We said, you can't use dollars anymore. The same thing that fucking Biden tried to do to Russia, right?
Yeah.
You can't use the dollar anymore for fucking transfer payments. Yeah. And it fucking crushed Iran's currency to like zero. They had a real bad hyperinflation. And what Iran ended up doing is they started trading their oil for gold. And then they were using the gold system. Buying shit with gold. Then the U.S. went in and said, no, you can't do that either. Kicked them out of that fucking market. But because
how do you kick someone out of the gold market?
You don't allow them to trade on it. You don't allow them to buy it, ship it, do it.
Yeah, but they still.
So what they ended up doing is they just ship their oil to China. China sends them cotton and food. So they do a goods trade, kind of like old school fucking trading. Mm-hmm. But like really, that's the U.S. bullies everybody that way. In Russia and China and all these other countries are getting sick of it. And they're like, fuck you. We're just going to create our own trading currency. They trade between each other. Russia and China have been doing it. Yeah. It's just another nail in the reserve dollar status. And once the U.S. loses the world reserve currency status, all those U.S. dollars that all these countries are holding because they need them to trade, they're not going to need them anymore. Shit, right? And they're going to fucking come back to the United States. We're going to have you think inflation's bad now? It's going to be catastrophic. The U.S. will be forced to do something. They're either going to be forced to A, go to war again, or B, actually revalue the dollar to be backed by gold.
They're going to go to war. They're going to
revalue the dollar to be backed by gold again, war, which would require a gold price of like $20,000 or $30,000 an ounce or something.
What are we doing tomorrow? Is there something tomorrow or no?
Spike Lee's coming on, or not Spike Lee?
Yes, that would be awesome. Spike Lee.
Spike Cohen is coming on tomorrow. Supposedly at 8:30 tomorrow night.
Oh, dang. Okay.
I know. I'm sorry. I tried to get it on the weekend.
No, you're good.
I couldn't. But we got a show next Saturday, May, with Brad Olson.
I know.
Esoteric series. That's should be a good show. Thankfully, Devin won't be there to put a squash on the spiritual realm.
Why not? What are you doing, Devin?
I'm going to be in Orange Beach, Alabama. Shrimp Fest.
Enjoy it. Enjoy that cash cow you have down there.
Fucking just eating it up, bro.
Share this video. Hit the like and subscribe if you like the content. We're going to try to book more interviews with different people. Ray has given me a list. So Ray wants to come on too and go. I think Ray might come on for the esoteric series, if I remember correctly.
What series?
The esoteric.
What the fuck is that?
Well, you'll have to tune in next Saturday.
I'm gonna have to tune in.
You're gonna have to tune in, bud. Anyway,
give us a watch.
Any final thoughts, May? What did you learn today?
It was an inside job. Richard Gage is awesome. He's fantastic. I think that could have went, like I said, for another couple of hours. I really think. I worry that with the people waking up to COVID, that it might be too late to still want to uncover the 9/11 bamboozlement, but I hope not. Like, I hope with this American ass fucking that we're getting, people will wake up and be like, hey, remember when those towers and that building and the Pentagon and all that happened and we went to war for what? Hey, let's come together. Let's merge that. Let's have a beautiful baby that is just eye popping, and let's carry that to the top.
It's not going to happen, bro. It's going to be just like JFK. You're going to have the people that question it and have all the evidence, and it's just going to stay in this realm.
Why don't people give a damn?
It's just going to stay here, bro.
I know, but it's frustrating.
Devin,
they almost had a riot last January, 2 years ago. Right?
Yeah, that didn't go well.
No, that did not go well for those who participated.
Devin, what did you learn from our today's show?
That yes, there was definitely help to bring down the towers and Building 7, which I even never knew about. But it looks like especially 7 looks more like a controlled demolition more than the towers do. The towers look like though too, but 7, when you watch it, really like in just those little clips you have, it's eye-opening and it's concerning, right? Like appalling, like really, like holy fuck, people actually did this to their own people or country just for control and gain. It's fucking sickening, right? If you actually really have to look down like why and what we're doing and why they did it and all this other shit, it's freaking appalling.
May, what did I learn today?
Ooh. What did you learn today? I think you had a grasp on a lot of this.
That you guys are amazing at interviews, and I love you guys.
Really?
Good show, everyone.
I thought it went
Did
well.
you see my message about the fly or spider you had crawling on your camera?
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's not